Contactless has assumed many avatars in a post-COVID world, and the pandemic has effectively accelerated India's march towards a contactless economy. This emergent economy is being driven by supply-side factors like the rise and adoption of digital technologies, 5G, cloud, AI and data analytics, and on the demand side, the need for convenience, along with a heightened awareness for health and safety. These are the biggest pull factors. As India reaches an inflection point where technology redefines operating models, businesses are having to digitize at a pace never seen before. Concepts like telemedicine, delivery by drones, on-the-go education are now a reality. In many sectors, we've seen companies traverse the phygital world to service the customer, and others like online food delivery, retail, e-commerce and payments are reporting a surge in both digital adoption and usage. So the question that we're asking today, as we settle into this contactless ecosystem, what kind of tech innovations can we expect, and what kind of policy support or shift will be needed to enable India's transformation into a contactless universe? Hello and welcome to Young Turks, India's longest-running show on startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Shereen, Bhan, and joining me to take the discussion forward is Kunal Bahl, the co-founder and CEO of Snapdeal. Also on the show, Sangita Reddy, the joint managing director at Apollo Hospitals, and Debjani Ghosh, the president of Nasscom. Kunal, Sangita and Debjani, many thanks for joining us here on Young Turks. Debjani, let me start by asking you, what we have seen over the last 8 to 9 months through the course of this pandemic is the emergence of a contactless economy. Large part of it was driven by necessity. The question now is how much of this is going to be sustained as we move towards perhaps getting a vaccine in place over the next few months and a resumption of normal life and normal activity. Are we going to be contactless or less contact?
So, Shereen, I don't think, and Sangita is the right person to talk about the vaccine, but I don't think getting the vaccine solves our problem. It is getting the vaccine distributed to each and every human being in the world. That is what is needed for us to reach the stage where we can say, okay, we are finally safe, at least for whatever time the vaccine keeps us immune. So, I don't see us moving away from a largely contactless world in any time in the near future, frankly. And I think also you have to keep in mind that in the last few months, businesses have realized the tremendous productivity is involved in a virtual model. The fact that you can actually conduct business without being face-to-face, without traveling 17 hours to go to another country just for one meeting and come back. All of this has been a huge realization, and it saves cost. It saves costs, it saves time. So I don't believe we are going to ever go back to a fully physical, and nor are we going to go into a fully digital world. But we are going to be somewhere in the middle. We're going to come out with a hybrid model that works for companies, and you will see a lot of business model reinvention around that, because that itself gives companies the ability to build competitive advantage. So yes, I think it's going to be largely contactless for a while at least, and we'll have to figure out how to use it as an opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. And, you're right in pointing out, Debjani, and I didn't mean to suggest that, the vaccine is going to be any sort of a magic bullet and will solve us of this pandemic. The question that I was asking is, as we saw with the case of demonetization, where everybody said we're now moving to a cashless economy, and it didn't turn out that way. That was the larger point that I was making, that, are we on the cusp of that kind of irreversible change? But, let me bring Sangita into the conversation, because one of the sectors amongst the many that will perhaps see a reimagination, a reinvention, will be, of course, healthcare. And that is something that will perhaps also, to a great degree, bridge the access deficit and perhaps also the cost deficit that we face, particularly in India and in many other countries. But the challenge of being able to also deliver on the human experience, I mean, at the end of the day, Sangita, whether it's medicine or education, you do want that human experience as well. In fact, there's a very interesting report put out by Deloitte in Monitor, which talks about the build-up of experience debt, which leads to user alienation. So how will sectors like yours be able to marry the benefits and the gains of deploying technology, but yet keeping that human interface intact?
So, Shereen, it's undoubtedly very innovative times. It's times where, to begin with, I think the power of humanity, the importance of human contact actually came to the fore so much. People know they can talk, communicate, buy, do a whole lot of things, but they're missing human contact. And so I think one of the major differences in this entire COVID era has been the fact that we had this concept of contactless economy and it has grown. So the inflection point of the usage of technologies that we always had are going to stay to a degree because people have experienced the value. However, as soon as you can get back in touch, people will try and do so, and hence will evolve this new hybrid capability. So putting this into an example in the healthcare field, uh, patients would have a surgery, get discharged from the hospital, and the doctor would say, come back and see me in 3 weeks. You know what? Very often the doctor's probably going to say that my team will be in touch with you on a daily basis. You may take home this device, and in 3 weeks, we will do a video consult to stay in touch with you. You will have a home care team come and take your blood. So I will see the reports when I see you. And for patients who were traveling from out of town, this is going to be a major boon. So many models like that. Tele-ICU, tele-radiology, telepathology. So specialization will go up. Use of technology will go up. And I think some of the statistics which came out during the COVID is that there was a 67% decline in in-doctor, inpatient kind of visits and a 500% increase in online doctor consults. But the most interesting one was that 80% of telemedicine users were first-time users. So these are, experiences that you've had for the first time. You discovered their value. Some of it will stay. It's not going to be completely contactless, but less contact, like you said. And new models are evolving.
New models are certainly evolving, and some of those numbers that you alluded to, Sangita, I would imagine that will change, because we did have a situation where people had no choice, they had no option. But what will this middle path look like as we move back to a degree of normalcy? I think that will be the true test of innovation. But let me bring Kunal into the conversation. Kunal, we're talking about less contact or contactless. What have you seen already develop? Sectors, industries, companies like yours arriving at new value propositions to cater to this new emerging class, to cater to this new emerging segment. What have you been able to see or develop in-house, for instance, in terms of capabilities to actually be able to deliver on that value proposition?
Yeah, Shereen, I think there is, I think since the pandemic began, I've been seeing two forms of India. One is in India, which is going through a lot of pain and stress and anxiety because of the health and economic impact. And then on a parallel track, I've been seeing a parallel India, which is fully vibrant with entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship coming up with brilliant new ideas basis the new reality that we all live in. And these have ranged from, we spoke about healthcare, education, e-commerce delivery. I mean, we've tried out, we've been testing out autonomous deliveries. I think you've covered it before as well. I think many companies are doing many interesting things. At an overall level, I feel that whether it's contactless or less contact, we will be on somewhere in that spectrum as we emerge out of this pandemic. And what is really interesting is that we have the robust digital infrastructure now in this country to create the innovation engines to leverage this new reality. The few things we will need to do, however, is one is just improve tech literacy. I feel that we are still, you have the top engineering colleges where there's a lot of innovation coming out. However, we need to go deeper there across the country. The second thing is we need to support financially innovations, especially the ones that are the riskiest ones. And there are a lot of programs in Israel that are doing it very successfully. And the final thing is I think we'll need to support failure. I think it's something we don't do too well as a country yet, where many of the innovations that will come out in this new reality, leveraging this new reality, whether it's drone delivery of medicines or autonomous delivery of e-commerce, may not work, and that's okay. But we need to create that environment that companies and entrepreneurs should be trying these new models out.
Well, speaking of creating that environment, Debjani, let me come back to you because that is an important point that Kunal was highlighting. And, you know, whether it's during a pandemic or pre-pandemic, I mean, failure is always something that we need to be prepared to deal with as we try and innovate. Now, from a regulatory perspective, you know, we've now got the IBC, for instance, in place. Do you think it's easier to fail today? And what kind of regulatory intervention, Debjani, do you believe is required?
I think India still has to come to terms with failure. I don't believe we have fully accepted that failure is okay, and you know it's okay to fail and move on. There's still a lot of work to be done. I mean, just think of it, Shereen. If you want to wind up a company today, just think of it and what is required. I mean, people have been struggling to wind up companies for years now, right? And it's not easy as yet. So at least what I will say is there's growing awareness and acceptance and appreciation for the need to do it within the regulators, within the government, etc. And you know, we continue to work with them to drive these changes, to bring about sort of what I call you know, a flexible regulatory mindset, which can continue to adapt as we know more, especially given the pace of disruption and how quickly disruption is happening around the world. So I stay hopeful, Shereen, and I think we have realized how important this is, and I think we will continue to work towards making it easy. Is it easy now, today? I think the answer is no.
But, you know, and I hope we don't come back to that, whether the government is going to support funding some of this innovation, Debjani, because very often, you know, that seems to be the demand that comes in. But it's not the government's job to fund innovation of this kind. So is there enough private sector appetite, you think, to be able to support, whether philanthropic or otherwise, to be able to support these kind of innovations?
So two things here, Shereen. First, I think we have to move out of that mindset where we think of innovation as a CSR activity or funding innovation as a CSR and philanthropic activity. I mean, in today's world, if you look at the hyper-digital world and a world which is, you know, where crisis is sort of the norm rather than, you know, if a crisis is sort of the norm we have to live with, the lens with which you look at innovation is completely changing. Innovation is becoming about problem solving. Innovation is becoming much more urgent. So successful innovation will be defined by your ability to move innovation to the market, out of the labs. How quickly do you do it? At what scale are you able to achieve it? And the kind of impact you have. So innovation has to become, I mean, we have to have a commercial approach to innovation, and we shouldn't feel apologetic about it. There is, I mean, the whole world is doing it. Why do we continue to say that, okay, let's do innovation has to be for good and let's use CSR? I really want to change that, see that mindset changing.
Ask you, you know, for instance, let's use the e-pharmacy example, because since we were talking about creating a much more conducive regulatory environment for a contactless economy, and for the longest time there was back and forth on whether this is a legit business or not. Have we passed that hump today?
Clearly, we have, Shereen. I think the e-pharmacy has become mainstay. I think some of the concerns in terms of the mechanism of writing the prescription, the ability to read, the technology in place, using prescriptions as a methodology of, you know, marketing, some of those needed to be taken care of. But clearly, e-pharmacy is mainstay now, is taking up more and more of the load. And interestingly, I think one of the big wins of the e-pharmacy is the momentum they're gaining in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And that's, I think, a story across all e-commerce, but the buoyancy of our smaller towns and cities is something that we should be very happy and very proud of. I want to take 1 minute on your earlier point of asking government to fund innovation. I don't think, people are asking or should be asking for government to fund innovation, but I think it's important for us to look at government's ability to orchestrate some of the requirements for innovation. So say in healthcare, the whole National Digital Health Mission enables a continuum of care and a flow of data, which is important. So the standards, the regulation, the guidelines is the government's job. It's private sector's job to come in there and make the right investments and to innovate on the models, ultimately keeping the customer in mind so that you have a faster ability to treat, a better ability to take care, an earlier ability to diagnose. So it's a combination. So it's an ecosystem orchestration that I think the government and the private sector have to play in together to deliver something new and valuable to the consumer.
I think, Sangita, you hit the nail on the head, because
A quick question.
even the role of government shouldn't be funding innovation, but I think government has to consume the innovation, especially in areas like healthcare, agriculture. There is so much good innovation happening. We need government to start becoming the buyer or user of these innovations, and that's where we need the government to put its money on the table. So the roles are changing.
Shereen, if I can, I want to showcase one innovative model that we've done, which is in primary healthcare, which is so much, it being spoken about now. So we run for the government of a certain state 150 primary healthcare centers. And these are all e-enabled. Every doctor does, electronic entry. So doctors who were trained 20 years ago are now using the latest protocols of caring. There's telemedicine for any, condition that can't be managed by the local doctor. There is a lab with an e-lab system. So they never run out of samples, tests, their reports, and we added the health and wellness in it. And simple use point, a case in point of proof of success is that when we took over, these primary healthcare centers used to see 7 customers a day. Within a year of their functioning, their average number of footfalls is over 58 customers a day. So customers know when you're doing something right. So the ability to take this EPHC model, which is it's a digital physical model, and spread it everywhere. So Debjani, I agree with you. Please let government consume innovation, enable us to scale it, and this will lead us into the next great horizon, which is the use of data and AI.
Absolutely, and I think the EPHC route is a very important route for India specifically. There is too much emphasis on specialized care, where there needs to be much more focused attention on providing primary, safe and efficient primary health care. But Kunal, let me come to you now. What we have seen through the course of this pandemic, and that's giving a rise to the kind of trends that we're talking about, largely on account of in-home consumption and a boom in in-home consumption. What are you seeing as the behavioral changes? I mean, today we're talking about healthcare, education, fintech, but let's talk about, the social experience. I mean, Zoom parties, house parties emerging as the top-rated app and so on and so forth. Kunal, what kind of changes do you foresee on that side?
I think some of these will have a shorter half-life than others in a post-pandemic world. I'm sure for every person who's enjoying those sit-at-home party apps is also reminiscing of the times when they were with friends in person. So I do feel that not everything will homogeneously settle at the same high level that it currently is trending at. That said, I feel that this is giving genesis to a completely new segment of services that didn't exist before. I think we talked a lot about healthcare. I feel in education, we are seeing phenomenal companies get created that are going to touch lives of hundreds of millions of people. One area where I'm quite excited about, I think we hear about all the coding classes and the K-12 education startups, etc. I think fundamentally people don't talk enough about the fact that we have a very large part of our country which hasn't gone through a formal education system, but are smart, passionate, ambitious, and they need some vocational learning and apprenticeship. And I feel that the next phase of the EdTech revolution will largely deal with trying to solve for that how do you get the hundreds of millions of people who are probably right now doing daily wage labor work to become skilled electricians or plumbers or factory workers, etc. And I feel that that will be the true edtech revolution that will change India. I think the coding classes and the K-12 classes are great, but if we are talking about a revolution, the revolution will likely happen when edtech truly penetrates the hundreds of millions. And I think because I see startups just when they are starting, I feel we should all feel very reassured about the future of our country because the wheels of innovation have already started moving there, in a way, thanks to this pandemic.
Yes, we have seen that significant acceleration over the last few months. Debjani, I'll give you the final say then. And I think one of the very important issues that Kunal raised was about skill enhancement and capability building. And, you know, just a short while ago, I was having a conversation about the need, and Sangita will know more about this, about the need to build in capabilities for ASHA workers, Anganwadi workers, you know, bring in more community participation when it comes to healthcare services. And it's across the board. I mean, we're talking about creating a team of paramedic frontline workers, and we don't have enough. So what is the role that you believe, you know, we can see some of these tools that we've innovated or seen emerge during the last few months sort of lead the charge in some of these spaces going forward?
You know, I think the pandemic has completely changed the rules of competition globally. And in today's world, business will go where talent is, period. I mean, talent is becoming the biggest competitive advantage that whether a business or a country or any organization can have. So talent is becoming absolutely critical. And what is needed is, you know, a mindset where we honestly start believing that talent development has to be job one for this country, and talent has to become India's biggest competitive advantage. In fact, just as Israel grabbed the position of startup nation when the entire entrepreneurship ecosystem was developing, I think this is India's moment to grab that position of becoming a talent nation. We have to aim for that. We have to become the talent nation for the world. And we have to figure out how to drive that upskilling and reskilling across every single sector. And, you know, whether it's healthcare, whether it's in government, whether it's education, whether it's manufacturing, every single sector is getting disrupted. We have to realize that. And if not, they should be getting disrupted if they want to stay relevant, if they want to continue to stay productive. And as they get disrupted, the jobs are changing, skills are changing. People talk about job losses. We're not seeing job losses, we are seeing job displacements. There are so many, you know, data analytics jobs that are open in the country across verticals, not just in the tech industry, across finance, across health, and there are not enough people that we can find to hire. So I think skilling has to become, Shereen, I mean, I'm very passionate about it. I think skilling has to become honestly job one for us, for this country. And we have the ability to aim for that position of becoming the talent nation. This one's ours to lose. We can't miss out on this opportunity.
This one is ours to lose, and we cannot afford to miss out on this opportunity. Debjani Ghosh, Sangita Reddy and Kunal, many thanks for joining us here on this CNBC TV 18 Young Turks special to talk about some of the challenges, but more importantly, the many opportunities that we need to capitalize on, we need to leverage on if we truly want to emerge as the talent nation of the world, as Debjani put it. But thanks very much for joining us here today, and thanks for your time. We'll take a break. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment with a lot more.